Hello guys, welcome to my new video. Today I will teach you how to create this Kovacic poster. I'm gonna break down every layer and effect I used. So before we get started, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And yeah, that's it, let's get into it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is create a new file. It's gonna be in 4:5 aspect ratio, so 1080 by 1350. ratio whatever, and everything else is like this. Click OK. The first thing I'm gonna do is bring in the photos, and let's cut them both out. So let me do this one first. So what I usually do for cutting out designs is I either pen tool them or just click remove background and see what kind of results that gets me. And this looks alright, but we need to mess around with it a little bit more. So let's go to select and mask. I'm gonna increase the contrast, shift the edges a bit, and give it some feather, maybe some more contrast, just to remove those dark edges. And since this photo is gonna be a little bit blended with the background, the edges are not that important. So let's give it some more contrast, and that's it, I think. That's it for that photo. And let's cut this one out as well. Select subject. You can do it like that as well, and then just remove the parts that are not selected well with pen tool or with those selection tools. This looks alright. It doesn't have to be perfect because people really won't see the details. So just fix the things that will probably be most noticeable. I like to do it this way, but there's probably other ways as well, to each their own. And that's basically it. Mask it, and again go to select and mask, shift the edge a bit so you get rid of that black border. I do it that way, but there's also a way of selecting just the edge and masking that out, but this works for now. Now we can get into the camera raw filter for this guy. Go to filter, camera raw filter, and let's increase the contrast a bit, exposure a bit. I think I increased the highlights a bit as well, lower the shadows probably. We're just trying to make it look a bit more sporty and energetic and have more contrast and not be bland. So let's do that. Increase some texture. Let's see how much texture this gives. Okay, maybe some clarity. Okay, grain, we're not gonna add grain. What else? We did sharpening there, so let's add some sharpening. And since the photo is a bit low quality, I'm gonna add some noise reduction just to get out these pixelated areas. Not a lot. And some color noise reduction in case there's some parts that have like some green tones, like here. See how they go away when I increase the noise reduction. And I think that's it for him. Let's do camera raw again, and as well just increase a little bit exposure, contrast. I'm not gonna mess around with this too much because the photo itself is already contrasted and saturated a lot. So let's add a little bit of texture maybe, and more sharpening. I mean, the photo is low quality, so the detail won't be noticeable, but let's try. I think this works for now. The next thing we should do is add a mask on this bigger photo and blend it with the background on the bottom. So just add a mask on it, use a black brush and fade it into the background. Or you can just click to get a softer transition. The next thing we should do is add some shadows and highlights on his face. So how are we going to do that? We are gonna add an exposure adjustment layer and clip it to the photo. First thing we need to do is lower the exposure. So let's do something like this. Then you're gonna use Command I to invert the mask. And now we're gonna use a white brush to show the darker parts that we made. you can lower the opacity of the brush here, for example to 20, and then you can start, using white brush, you can start adding the shadows here a bit. I'm gonna make it so that the bright part is gonna be on the right side, like the light is hitting it here on his forehead. You don't have to do a lot of this. Just a little bit. You can already see it's really noticeable when you turn it off and on, but yeah, mess around with this until you get desired results. Yeah, I'm happy with this. Now we can add some highlights. So again, an exposure layer, but this time we're gonna bring the exposure up. So for example, 0.4, then invert the mask again, and using the white brush, just add some bright highlights. We are basically just going over the real highlights that are already on the photo, but we are just increasing them and making them more noticeable. So when you turn it off and on, it's already visible. Yep, I'm happy with that. I like to also do another set of those exposure adjustment layers, but this time I'm not gonna do it by hand. I'm gonna select it like this. So first add the exposure adjustment layer, clip it again lower the exposure, but click on the mask after that and go to select and select color range, and this time we're gonna add shadows. So it will automatically select all the shadows, and just click OK, and it automatically darkens the shadows. And you can mess around with the exposure layer again so you can see what it does, but yeah, I'm gonna keep it like this. And then another set of that adjustment layer, but this time we're gonna increase the exposure, click select color range, and gonna select highlights. We're gonna lower them a little bit, and also what you can do is soften the mask a little bit, so just increase the feather to maybe 2 pixels. It's really not a big of a difference, but yeah, not a big of a difference, but it looks better when you zoom in. And that's it for him. The next thing we're gonna do is gonna be his eyes. So create a new layer, clip it again and put it to overlay, and use a white brush to go over his eyes. You can put the opacity to 100 and just go over the whole eye. I know it looks crazy right now, but that's why we are going to decrease the opacity. So make it around 50. And then the next thing is going to be a new layer. We're going to use blue color to color his eyes. And just go over the eye. And put the blending mode to color. Make sure to get the whole eye so there's not visible borders. Like this, and then maybe lower the opacity a little bit as well. And the next thing is gonna be adding a black and white filter. And we're gonna drag it under the eyes so the eyes show like this. You can delete the mask on the black and white filter. And that's it for this cutout. Now we're gonna move over to this guy. You can group this one and call it, I don't know, cutout 1 or something. For this guy, what I didn't add a lot of exposure layers, but what I did is add a hue and saturation layer, clip it to him, you can delete the mask. And what I did was delete all the oranges, yellows, greens. I just kept the blue colors of his jersey. So let's do that. Go to red and then go saturation and delete it completely. And you can drag these sliders to get rid of all the other colors until we keep only the jersey. Drag it until you feel happy with the results. Make sure to not get rid of the blue and cyan colors. For example, we can get rid of the magenta on the ball. Maybe it's too close to the blue on the scale. Let's see. I mean, that's alright, I think. Maybe more greens like this. That should work. And then we can add another black and white adjustment layer and clip it again and invert the mask. Using a white brush, we're gonna get rid of all the excess blue that's on his white pants and somewhere else. So I'm gonna delete it on the ball. I'm gonna make the ball all black and white. His cleats. Try to get it as nice as you can. I'm gonna speed up a little bit and not make it perfect since I'm just showing you for this video, but just go around the blues and make sure to delete them. You can bring things back just by inverting the colors. Now let's add some light onto him using a different method. So we're not gonna use an exposure layer, we are gonna use a white brush, that's it. So let's get here and just go over the edges a bit. Also what you can do is just select the part that you want to brighten up and not go over the borders, and then use the brush inside the selection. Also, if you want to highlight this leg, for example, just select it like this. I'm not doing it perfect, just so you know, but I'm showing you what to do. And so you select the leg and then you can go around the edge without going to the other section. So this is how it looks before and after. And where else we can do it? We can do it a little bit on his arm. I know I said that the light is going to be coming from the right side, but on this particular photo the light is already coming from the left and the right, I think. So we're gonna increase that a little bit, and also the light on this poster is not gonna be realistic, it's more stylized, so you don't have to follow the rules every time. You can play around with it because, yeah, there's no rules in this type of design. Of course, you need to balance it well, but other than that, you don't have to be strict about all of the stuff. Just play around and see what feels good. And yeah, after we did that, we can group him again and put him in cutout 2. And I'm gonna make a new empty layer and use a white brush here where the light is supposed to be, and just tap it once. That's literally it. And maybe even lower the opacity because this is too bright. Like this. And we're gonna call it light. Yep, that's it. The next thing we're gonna do is add a shadow to this guy. So let's make a new layer and put it under the cutout and use a black brush. So what I like to do usually is just make the brush an elliptical shape and then tap it where I want it and then transform it with the transform tool and position it how I want to. And then I'm gonna do that for the ball as well, or you can just duplicate the shadow that you already made and move it where you want to. I'm not the greatest with the shadows either, but I do what I think looks good. And then we're gonna do another one for the foot behind him, and this one isn't touching the ground, so there needs to be space between. And we can also make it a bit smaller and also lower the opacity, because the closer the foot to the ground is, the middle part of the shadow would be darker. I'm not gonna mess around with the details as much because this shadow is not as visible in the design as sometimes it can be, but I'm gonna leave it at that right now. And then we're gonna add a full body shadow, and we're gonna do that by duplicating the cutout layer, merging it all in one. And then, since I said the light is coming from here and here in this photo, we're gonna drag this guy first to the left side. And we are also gonna make another duplicate of the cutout and drag it to this side. Make both of the cutouts black. So add a color overlay and make them black. You can rasterize the layers as well, and then we can name them shadow left, shadow right. After you did that, you can blur it a little bit. So go to blur, Gaussian blur, and then blur it. Let's say 4. And let's say 4 here, and then probably bring it up a little bit like this. And then we're gonna add a mask on both of them, and we're gonna use a gradient tool that goes from black to nothing, and then, or it can go from black to white, whatever. Let me do the black to white. And we're gonna make the shadow become lighter as it goes further away from the player, so we're just gonna drag the gradient like this and play around with it until you feel happy, and do the same thing for the other shadow. Like this, and maybe lower the opacity on both of them, and that's it. I'm pretty happy with that. I think it's much lighter in the original poster, but we're gonna leave it like this. We can put that shadow under the cutout as well, and if you want you can group it and call it shadows too, I don't know. The next thing we need to do is add another layer under both of those and use a white brush, but fix it so it's normal circle. And we're gonna use this white brush to make a glow behind this cutout, so it acts kind of as a shadow to space it, to make it stand out from the other cutout. So just tap once like this, maybe even smaller, and tap it once like this, and that's it. We're gonna name that white glow. The next thing we should do is add some guides that will help us with the text. So let's do that by clicking View, Guides, and New Guide Layout. So I'm not sure what the original layout was, but I believe it was 100 pixels from both of the sides. You can remove columns and rows. And let's make them black so they stand out. and click OK. Now we are gonna add some text that we had on the sides of the original poster, and I think it was Matteo, but it was vertical, so let's transform it like this. The spacing was the same as here, and I think this one was centered here and it was blue, so let's use the blue color that we have on the jersey. Second text was his surname, Kovacic, and then we made it darker color, and I'm gonna put it right here, or maybe a bit above the shadow. The third text was city, and we had it here. That's it from those text details. That's how I'm gonna call them, text details. After we did that, we can make a new layer under everything, and it's gonna be a shape layer of a square. So fill it with black or something and put it right here. And we need to add a photo on top of it, so drag this photo and clip it onto the rectangle. And let me see how we did it. I think we did it something like this. The next thing we're gonna do is use the same hue and saturation layer we did on him. We're gonna use that layer on top of this photo. And we need to add another layer on top of it. It's gonna be a black and white adjustment layer, and we're gonna invert it. And now we need to mess around with the background. I remember the background was black and white in the original poster, so let's do that. So just go over it, go over this whole part here. And let's go over this part as well. Okay, this is it. And now we need to add another layer on top of it, clip it, and the layer is gonna be the same as behind this cutout. It's gonna act as some kind of a white shadow, just to make the cutout in front stand out. So just add it like this. Maybe that's too much, but yeah, something like this. That's it. And one more thing we can do is use the hue and saturation on this layer to adjust this blue tone closer to this guy right here. So we're just gonna drag it around, and I think this is already pretty close. That's it. So to balance it out, I'm gonna add another rectangle, and I'm gonna add it to the bottom right now. So what I'm gonna do now is use this photo. I'm gonna clip it to this rectangle, make it like this, and we're just gonna use the rectangle to mask it, and we can get rid of the rectangle. Then you're gonna click on the photo and go to image adjustments and use the threshold filter, and we are gonna mess around with it until we think it looks well. I'm just gonna leave it like this. And what I did was go to the layer, double click it, go to this blending part and blend if we're gonna remove the whites from here. Wait, we can't even see. Let's see if we move it on top of everything and see what happens. We're gonna remove the whites like this, and that's it. We can even apply the mask since we don't need it anymore. Just put it here. Also, to get rid of the whites permanently, convert the layer to smart object and then rasterize it. And we are gonna color it, and we're gonna color it to a brighter gray color, something like this. I think something like this was in the original. Maybe a bit brighter like this. The next thing I did was make a text layer behind all of this, and we are gonna type in a letter M. I'm gonna put it somewhere around here, The font I'm using here is called Louisa CP. And for this, we're gonna delete the fill on here, put it to 0, go into the layer, use the stroke, put the stroke inside, make the stroke the same blue color as on the jersey, and lower the stroke really thin, so maybe 1 or 2, probably 1. And then we can duplicate that layer. Instead of M, we can type a K, and we're gonna put it here on the bottom. And instead of this blue color, we are gonna use a gray one, a really bright gray one, so it's barely visible, like this. After that, we're gonna add some dots. I added them here just to make the cutout stand a bit more. And then I'm gonna do the same and add them here behind this cutout, but I'm going to make them black here, or dark gray, whatever. I'm gonna center them both like this. The next thing I did was get this city logo, and I'm going to put it here in the bottom. I'm gonna make it really low on opacity so it's barely visible, and put it to the bottom and add another layer under it, and just gonna use the black to make some shadow and make it even more visible, and lower the opacity on that too, just so it slightly shows up here. Small detail, but fills up the space. The next thing we're gonna do is add another text layer, and we're gonna put a K in here, and we're gonna make it really big and in front of everything here. And we are gonna make it a dark gray color instead of full black. Something like this. And we're gonna do filter, blur, and field blur. Convert it to smart object. And here I will move this blur right here, so it blurs the edge, but I'm gonna make this clearer. So 2 points, one that is clearer and one that is blurred. You can put high quality if you want, and okay, and you can move it a little bit more here. Next thing we're gonna do is make another text layer and put Matteo in this one. Make the spacing normal, and we're gonna put this one under the main cutout, like here. Maybe lower the spacing again just to make the A and M connect, and put it somewhere around here, and do another one. This one is gonna be blue, and it's gonna be Kova text, and make it blue, something like this. Probably take the hex code from this color right here, like this, and this one is gonna be behind this cutout, like this. The next thing I'm gonna do is just name all these layers, or just group this to get a little bit more organized. Square photo, dots, city logo, shadow, this is the main background, stadium, okay, and that's it. Next thing we can do is make a new full black layer, put it to screen, and go to filter, noise, add noise, and then you can add some noise, probably around 10. Make it uniform and monochromatic, of course, and click OK. And we're gonna mask that layer, and we're gonna remove the grain from his face because it doesn't look that well. And using a black brush, just go over his face, maybe over his photo a little bit, and maybe over the whole cutout actually, because the main part where I wanted the grain was this letter and these texts, and that's it. The next thing we're gonna do is add grain, but to the white parts, and an easy trick for that is duplicating this grain layer we made, remove the mask from it, and we can call it the white grain. or actually grain inverted maybe. And we're gonna go to image adjustment invert, and you can see if you put the blending mode to normal, you can see the black dots now, and you can put the blending mode to darken now, so it can stay like this. And you can also mask it and remove it from the face or anywhere where you don't want it. So that's it. We are gonna add another small city logo right here. And now we are going to duplicate and merge all these layers. Call it CC, convert it to smart object, and go into filter and camera raw filter. We're gonna add some more contrast because it looks a little bit bland here. You can also add some grain or whatever looks good to you. You can also mess around with the colors on the bottom here, so you can basically get a whole different design from this. You can duplicate this again, and now I'm gonna add some motion blur. Motion blur, make it like this, and make it like 25. Mask it, and then invert the mask and use a brush, white brush, to add the motion blur. So I'm gonna add it a little bit here, maybe not over the letters, and maybe a bit here. This is of course not to show movement, but just to add a little bit of spice to the design, if you want to call it like that. I think it adds a nice effect. And maybe also over this letter here. And maybe to his feet. And of course you can mess around with the opacity settings of the brush so the blur doesn't look really hard. And what I like to add at the end, of course not on every design, but I think it looks okay on this one, is some chromatic aberration. So just duplicate it again, remove the red channel, and move the design 1 pixel down and 1 pixel right. 1 pixel down and 1 pixel right, and you get this effect. I think it works here. It works without and with it, but I'm gonna leave it. And this is it. Let me drag this to the original design to see how close we were. So this is the design we made in this tutorial, and this is the design that I made. I think it's pretty close. I didn't position the text properly that's behind him, but other than that, it's pretty close. I hope that this tutorial helped you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more of these long format breakdowns. And yep, that's it. See you guys in the next one. Peace.